Millions of football fans thought they were just tuning into another ESPN primetime segment. Coach and quarterback sitting side by side, sharing polite words about teamwork and preparation. But what they got instead was a live confrontation that shook the Cleveland Browns to their core. In a matter of seconds, rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders did something most players wouldn't dare attempt. He challenged his head coach on national television in front of millions without flinching. The moment was raw, it was unscripted, and it spread like wildfire before the broadcast even ended. One icy line from Sanders cut through the studio, leaving Kevin Stefanski squirming in his chair while fans erupted in cheers online. To the casual viewer, it may have looked like a slip, a young player speaking too freely. But for those paying attention, this wasn't an accident. It was a calculated strike, years of tension compressed into one viral moment. Think about it. Quarterbacks are usually trained to smile, give rehearsed answers, and keep every soundbite polished. They're told to protect the system, protect the coach, protect the image of the team. Sanders ignored all of that. Instead, he stared directly into the camera, unshaken, and told the truth as he saw it. Truth that fans already suspected, truth the locker room had whispered about for months. And while Stefanski shifted uncomfortably, forcing a smile that fooled no one, Sanders came off as fearless. It was more than just a player voicing frustration. It was the image of a rising star taking control of his own narrative, no matter the cost. Within minutes, clips flooded Twitter, TikTok compilations hit millions of views, and Instagram stories echoed the same message. Shedeur Sanders isn't afraid anymore. If you're new here and want more deep dives into moments just like this, where sports collide with drama, power, and culture, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what happened in those 8 minutes of television wasn't just another sports headline. It became the spark of something far bigger. A power struggle inside the Browns organization, a generational clash between old-school coaching and modern athlete empowerment, and a moment that fans across the country won't forget. The segment began innocently enough. ESPN's cameras were rolling, the studio lights were blinding, and Shedeur Sanders sat just a few feet from head coach Kevin Stefanski. Host Stephen A. Smith lobbed what seemed like a harmless question. What's your role in Cleveland's offense right now, and how do you see it evolving this season? Now, for most players, that's an easy softball. The standard playbook answer is something safe, diplomatic. I'm just here to help the team, or whatever the coach asks of me, I'll do. It's the kind of response drilled into athletes during media training, designed to avoid headlines and keep the peace. But Shedeur, he didn't follow the script. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, locked his eyes on the camera, and delivered one of the most chillingly confident statements fans had ever heard from a young quarterback. I can't control who benches me, I just control what I do on the field. But everybody knows what happens when I actually get to play. The studio instantly shifted. A wave of laughter, cheers, and applause broke out from the audience. You could almost feel the electricity through the screen. The comment wasn't loud, it wasn't emotional, but the way Sanders said it, calm, sharp, and deliberate, made it land like a thunderclap. The camera operators knew what they had just captured, and they wasted no time cutting back to Stefanski's face. What they caught was brutal. A forced smile, the kind that looks more like a grimace. His hands fidgeted on the desk, he shifted in his seat, and his headset slipped as he adjusted nervously. It was the image of a coach suddenly losing control of the moment.
And just like that, the clip exploded online. Within minutes, Twitter feeds were overflowing with reactions. TikTok compilations with dramatic music edits were being posted before the commercial break even hit. On Instagram, the line, "Everybody knows what happens when I play," became the caption of the night, plastered across highlight reels and memes. One viral post racked up more than 2 million impressions overnight with a single, blunt caption. Shedeur just cooked Stefanski on live TV. But here's the thing. This wasn't some slip of the tongue or a rookie getting carried away under the bright lights. To insiders, it looked far more calculated. Every word Sanders chose hit a nerve. Pointing out the benching, highlighting his performance and reminding the world that stats back him up. This wasn't emotion, it was strategy. And as Stefanski sat there trying to keep composure, it became crystal clear to fans and analysts alike. This wasn't a coach running the show. This was a quarterback seizing the spotlight, refusing to shrink back, and proving in real time that he was bigger than the role he had been given. But if the live exchange itself was dramatic, the story behind it, the months of tension and buildup, made the moment even more explosive. To understand why Shedeur Sanders' words hit so hard, you have to rewind the clock. This wasn't a random rookie taking a swipe at his coach. This moment had been building for months, some say even before the season officially began. Back in training camp, whispers started circulating about a suspension controversy. The details were murky, but one thing was clear. Sanders and Stefanski weren't on the same page. Practices were tense, decisions felt political, and insiders reported a growing rift between the rising quarterback and the coaching staff. At the heart of it was philosophy. Stefanski, known for his old-school, system-first mentality, insisted on sticking to conservative play calling. He wanted his offense predictable, structured, and tightly controlled. Shedeur? He represented the opposite. Explosive, dynamic, and unafraid to push the ball downfield. He thrived on creativity and risk, the very things Stefanski worked to suppress. During film sessions, Sanders reportedly began raising questions. Why weren't certain plays designed to maximize his arm strength? Why were aggressive passing opportunities being dialed back in favor of cautious runs? Multiple sources claimed his frustration was clear. He knew his skill set could change games, yet he was stuck watching from the sidelines while the offense sputtered. But instead of collaboration, Stefanski doubled down. He brushed off the questions, insisting on system execution over individual flair. It was the classic clash, the authority of the coach versus the instincts of the player. And in those meeting rooms, the tension only grew stronger. The numbers told the story just as loudly. Every time Sanders got a chance to step on the field, his production outshined the competition. His completion percentage? Higher. Yards per attempt? Better. Touchdown to interception ratio? Nearly spotless. And yet despite all of that, his playing time remained limited. To teammates, it didn't add up. To fans, it felt like sabotage. That's why his line on ESPN hit so perfectly. "I can't control who benches me" wasn't just an offhand remark. It was a direct callback to weeks of frustration, to moments when his talent was ignored, and to a coach who refused to budge. And here's the kicker. People close to the team believed Shedeur had been waiting for this chance, waiting for the right stage, the right platform, and the right question. So when Stephen A. tossed him that softball, he didn't waste it. He turned a simple interview into a live declaration of independence. This wasn't a sudden outburst. It was the release of months of pressure, a calculated strike in what insiders now describe as a growing Cold War inside the Browns facility. And when those words hit the airwaves, they did more than embarrass Stefanski. They triggered the next phase of the battle, a war of perception, strategy, and power that was only just beginning. On the surface, Shedeur Sanders' statement sounded simple, just 3 short sentences. But the way he delivered them and the meaning tucked inside each one showed a level of calculation that went far beyond a casual answer. Let's break it down. "I can't control who benches me." With that opening line, Sanders immediately shifted the spotlight. He didn't point fingers directly, but everyone knew exactly who he meant: Kevin Stefanski. It wasn't loud, it wasn't disrespectful, but it was unmistakable. By framing it as something outside his control, He positioned himself as the professional caught in a flawed system, a player doing his job while leadership held him back. In one stroke, he called out the coach's decisions without even saying his name.
I just control what I do on the field. This was the pivot. Instead of sounding bitter or combative, Sanders framed himself as disciplined, focused, and unshaken. He reminded everyone that when he gets the chance, he performs. This phrasing turned him from a frustrated backup into a figure of accountability, someone who only wants to let his play do the talking. Fans eat that up because it sounds less like whining and more like confidence. But everybody knows what happens when I actually get to play. And here's where the knife twisted. That last sentence wasn't just confidence, it was challenge. By saying everybody knows, Sanders tapped into something bigger than himself. He pulled the fans, the media, even his teammates into his corner. It wasn't just his opinion anymore. It was the truth everyone had already seen. The numbers, the highlights, the sparks of brilliance when he was allowed to step on the field. It was as if he was saying, "You all know I'm better, so why pretend otherwise?" The brilliance of the statement is how layered it was. 3 lines, each building on the last. It started with a call-out, shifted to professionalism, then ended with undeniable authority. No yelling, no anger, just calm delivery that carried more weight than a screaming rant ever could. And the effect was immediate. Analysts called it strategic communication warfare. Former quarterbacks noted his eye contact never wavered, his tone stayed steady, and his body language screamed confidence. Nothing about it felt like a slip, it looked like preparation. The moment exposed the contrast in full color. Stefanski, sweating under the lights, trying to mask discomfort with a forced grin, while Sanders looked like the one in control, the one unfazed by pressure, the one who carried himself like the true leader of the team. To the casual fan, it was a mic drop moment. To insiders, it was something even more dangerous, a young quarterback showing he knew exactly how to use the media to his advantage. And as powerful as that single exchange was, it didn't just stay in the studio. The ripples spread immediately, through the locker room, through the fan base, and across every corner of social media. And that's where things got even more complicated, because the reaction inside the team was anything but unanimous. The real shockwaves from Shedeur Sanders' ESPN moment weren't just felt online. They were felt inside the Browns' facility, where the reaction was far from unanimous. If anything, that single interview drew a bold line down the middle of the locker room. Privately, several veteran players admitted they respected what Sanders said. They may not have cheered in front of cameras, but behind closed doors, his honesty resonated. Offensive linemen, the guys tasked with protecting him, were reportedly frustrated by the same conservative play calling that limited his chances to shine. They knew what Sanders could do if the chains were taken off, and his words echoed their unspoken thoughts. Receivers, too, were quietly supportive. According to team insiders, they acknowledged having better chemistry with Sanders than with other quarterbacks on the roster. His timing, accuracy, and willingness to take risks downfield gave them opportunities they weren't getting elsewhere. For them, Sanders wasn't just a teammate, he was a chance to unlock their full potential. Defensive players, meanwhile, saw things from a different angle. They weren't as directly impacted by the play calling, but they recognized dysfunction when they saw it. Some even admitted the team's identity felt fractured under Stefanski's leadership. To them, Sanders' candor wasn't disrespect, it was necessary truth. But not everyone felt that way. There were veterans who saw his comments as dangerous, even reckless. They grew up under the old-school rules. You never call out a coach, especially not in public. Respect the hierarchy, handle grievances internally, keep family business inside the house. For them, Sanders had broken an unwritten code, no matter how valid his frustrations might be.
That divide created tension that no coach wants to manage. Position coaches reportedly found themselves caught in the middle, forced to balance loyalties between a head coach fighting to keep control and a quarterback whose star was rising by the day. Some sympathized with Sanders but stayed silent to avoid fallout. Others defended Stefanski's authority, even while privately admitting the kid had a point. The dynamic was messy, but one truth became impossible to ignore. Sanders wasn't isolated. He wasn't some rookie barking into the wind. He had allies, both young and old, who respected his courage, even if they couldn't say it out loud. And for the younger players, his willingness to speak up wasn't just respected, it was celebrated. To them, Sanders represented something bigger than a quarterback. He represented a shift in culture, a new generation that refused to bite their tongue when leadership was failing them. His boldness gave them permission to think differently about their own roles, their own futures. The Browns' locker room was no longer just a collection of players. It had become a battleground of philosophies, tradition versus transformation, silence versus honesty, hierarchy versus empowerment.
And if the locker room was divided, the fan base was about to be split even wider. Because once Sanders' comments escaped the walls of Cleveland and reached the wider football world, the reaction was louder, messier, and far more explosive. The fans didn't just watch this unfold, they turned it into a cultural moment. The second Shedeur Sanders' words hit the airwaves, the internet went into overdrive. Twitter, or X as some call it now, lit up instantly, with hashtags like Free Shedeur and Everybody Knows What Happens When I Actually Get to Play climbing into the trending list within minutes. TikTok edits popped up before ESPN had even gone to its first commercial break, with users cutting the clip to dramatic music, slow-motion replays, and captions like, "This man just ended his coach's career in 10 seconds flat." By the next morning, the numbers were staggering. A single viral post on Twitter racked up over 2 million impressions overnight. One TikTok edit, featuring Sanders' line, "Everybody knows what happens when I actually get to play," crossed 10 million views in less than 24 hours. Instagram story after Instagram story shared screenshots of Stefanski's awkward smile, captioned with one word, "Cooked." But the frenzy didn't stop online. Local sports talk shows in Cleveland canceled their normal programming just to debate the clip. Call-in lines jammed with fans who couldn't stop talking about it. Sports bars reported record crowds just to watch replays of the segment. Jersey sales for Sanders spiked so dramatically that some local shops couldn't keep them in stock. And here's where things got fascinating. The fan base split almost perfectly along generational lines. Older fans, the ones who'd lived through decades of Browns disappointment, saw Sanders' comments as dangerous. To them, it looked like arrogance, a rookie stepping out of line, disrespecting authority. Their argument was simple: no player is bigger than the team, and no quarterback should embarrass his coach on live TV. But younger fans? They ate it up. To them, Sanders wasn't being disrespectful, he was being real. They saw a fearless quarterback speaking truth to power, refusing to accept mediocrity, and demanding accountability from leadership. Reddit threads blew up with comments like, "Finally, someone in Cleveland has a backbone," and "This is the QB we've been waiting for." Even neutral football fans outside Cleveland got pulled into the drama. National media shows like First Take and Undisputed dedicated entire segments to dissecting the moment. Skip Bayless called it a generational changing of the guard. Shannon Sharp praised Sanders for showing franchise-level confidence. Colin Cowherd labeled it the mic drop that shifted Cleveland's future. And through all of this, the Browns' front office watched helplessly as the narrative slipped further out of their control. What ESPN had planned as a feel-good segment about unity and development instead had morphed into unscripted television gold, the kind of moment networks dream about, but teams dread. Sanders had turned a harmless interview into a viral cultural flashpoint. He wasn't just a quarterback anymore, he was a movement. And while fans and media couldn't get enough of the drama, inside the Browns organization, the chaos was just beginning. Because as the noise grew louder, ownership was forced to make a choice:
Back the coach who looked rattled on national television, or back the young quarterback who now held the city in the palm of his hand? That's when the fallout behind closed doors began, and it was uglier than anyone expected. The buzz outside the building was deafening, but the real storm hit inside Cleveland's front office. Within hours of the broadcast, ownership and management were scrambling to figure out how to contain a situation that had spiraled far beyond their control. What ESPN had intended as a polished, PR-friendly showcase ended up exposing fault lines that the Browns had been trying to keep buried. The clip of Shedeur Sanders' calm defiance wasn't just a viral moment, it was a public relations nightmare for head coach Kevin Stefanski, whose authority now looked weaker than ever. According to multiple reports, Jimmy Haslam, the team's owner, immediately scheduled emergency meetings with senior staff. The agenda was simple but daunting: evaluate the damage, measure fan reaction, and figure out whether the franchise still had faith in Stefanski's leadership. Behind closed doors, the phrase "organizational messaging overhaul" started circulating, a clear sign that Cleveland's leadership knew the problem wasn't going away on its own. Meanwhile, Sanders' camp moved quickly. His agent reportedly met with front office representatives the very next morning. Topics on the table included expanded playing time, input on play calling, and even long-term contract considerations. Shedeur and his team were leveraging his newfound public support to secure influence inside the organization. And honestly, the timing couldn't have been better.
Stefanski, on the other hand, was in an impossible position. His authority had been undermined in front of millions, and any attempt to punish or silence Sanders would have looked desperate, maybe even petty. Yet doing nothing made him appear weak, a coach unable to control his locker room. No matter which way he turned, the optics looked bad. General manager Andrew Berry found himself stuck in the middle. On one side, he had ownership demanding damage control. On the other, he had a young quarterback whose talent was undeniable, whose popularity was skyrocketing, and whose jersey sales were now outpacing every other player on the roster. Supporting Stefanski risked alienating the future face of the franchise. Backing Sanders meant undercutting the head coach in full view of the league. To make matters worse, media coverage poured gasoline on the fire. Local outlets ran front-page stories with headlines like "Quarterback or Coach, Who Runs the Browns?" National commentators speculated about Stefanski's job security, and former NFL coaches went on record calling it one of the most embarrassing moments of his career. Inside the facility, the tension was palpable. Every interaction between Sanders and Stefanski was suddenly magnified. Reporters swarmed practices, cameras zoomed in on sideline conversations, and analysts dissected their body language frame by frame. Was Stefanski avoiding eye contact? Was Sanders taking the lead in huddles? Nothing escaped scrutiny. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more chaotic, another layer was added: whispers of potential coaching changes. Multiple league insiders claimed that agents for assistant coaches and even college coordinators had already reached out to the Browns, quietly expressing interest in a possible vacancy. Whether those rumors were real or speculative didn't matter. The damage was done. Stefanski's seat was hotter than ever, and everyone knew it. Shedeur, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing had happened. He showed up early to practice, executed plays with precision, and stayed locked in despite the circus surrounding him. To teammates, his composure under pressure only reinforced the idea that he was more than just a quarterback. He was a leader, maybe even the leader Cleveland had been waiting for. In less than a week, the Browns' organizational hierarchy had been flipped upside down. The coach looked diminished, the quarterback looked untouchable, and ownership was facing a decision that could define the franchise for years. But if the fallout inside Cleveland was chaotic, what Shedeur did next transformed the situation entirely, shifting him from promising rookie to undeniable franchise cornerstone.
What separates a flash-in-the-pan headline from true leadership is how a player responds when the spotlight burns hottest. And in the days after his ESPN bombshell, Shedeur Sanders proved that he wasn't just a rookie making noise. He was a quarterback stepping into franchise territory. While the media swarmed and Stefanski struggled to steady his footing, Sanders kept his focus locked on the field. Teammates noticed. He was still the first one in the building, showing up early to watch film. He still led drills with sharp precision, directing receivers and checking protections at the line. If anything, his attention to detail only grew stronger, as if the chaos around him fueled his commitment. Reporters expected arrogance. They expected distraction. What they got instead was composure. Sanders answered questions calmly, brushed off speculation, and redirected attention back to football. Every time a microphone was shoved in his face, he avoided cheap shots and soundbite wars. Instead, he let the original clip speak for itself, refusing to add unnecessary fuel. That restraint impressed even his critics. Meanwhile, the spotlight on him only intensified. Within 72 hours, his Instagram following had jumped by 500,000. TikTok videos of his viral moment were closing in on 15 million views. On Twitter, mentions of his name skyrocketed by more than 1,500%. Endorsement offers began trickling in as brands recognized the marketability of a confident, fearless quarterback who had captured national attention. And it wasn't just numbers. Inside the Browns facility, his influence was unmistakable. Younger players gravitated toward him naturally, drawn to his calm confidence and unshakable energy. Veterans who once stayed neutral began to quietly acknowledge his leadership, noting the consistency he showed even while the organization around him spun into chaos. Stefanski, by contrast, looked increasingly defensive. At practices, cameras caught him folding his arms tighter, avoiding interactions with Sanders unless absolutely necessary. His posture screamed frustration. His tone with the media grew shorter. And while he tried to project authority, it was obvious who carried the confidence now. The Browns facility itself had transformed into a media circus. National reporters parked themselves outside the gates, local news helicopters hovered overhead. Every glance, every handshake, every passing conversation between Sanders and Stefanski became headline material. But the chaos that might have rattled most rookies only seemed to elevate Shedeur. To many, it felt like he had just graduated. No longer the wide-eyed newcomer waiting his turn, Sanders had evolved, almost overnight, into the face of Cleveland's future. He wasn't asking for respect anymore, he was commanding it.
And then came the twist that sealed the shift of power entirely: whispers of resignation. Reports surfaced that Kevin Stefanski's grip on the team had weakened so much that even ownership was considering alternatives. Within days, the story had gone from one viral comment to whispers of a full-blown coaching change. Sanders didn't have to push it further. He didn't have to say another word. By staying calm and professional, he proved that the power shift was already complete. The locker room saw it, the fans felt it, and ownership knew it. And when the dust finally settled, the rumors turned into reality: a resignation letter, a philosophical split, and a rookie quarterback who had just become the cornerstone of a franchise overnight. It didn't take long for rumors to harden into reality. Just 1 week after Shedeur Sanders' viral television moment, multiple trusted sources confirmed what many already suspected. Kevin Stefanski had submitted his resignation. The official statement framed it politely: philosophical differences regarding the direction of the organization. But no one was fooled. The truth was obvious. A single interview had triggered a chain reaction that toppled the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. For Stefanski, it was the ultimate humiliation. He walked into that ESPN studio as the authority figure, the face of discipline and control.
He left it as the symbol of an outdated philosophy, a man visibly rattled by a rookie who refused to play by the old rules. His forced smile and nervous body language would live on in highlight reels as the moment the balance of power shifted forever. For Sanders, it was the coronation. In the span of days, he had gone from a promising rookie to the undeniable cornerstone of the franchise. His leadership wasn't defined by rah-rah speeches or chest-pounding theatrics. It was defined by precision, confidence, and the courage to speak truths that everyone else tiptoed around. Fans weren't just supporting him, they were rallying behind him, treating him as the symbol of change Cleveland had been desperate for. Inside the facility, the transformation was immediate. Interim coaches adjusted practice schemes to highlight Sanders' strengths. Playbooks opened up. Receivers and linemen, players who had quietly voiced their frustrations, suddenly played with a spark that hadn't been seen all season. Veterans who once questioned his boldness now praised his preparation. Younger teammates idolized his courage. The locker room, which once divided, began to coalesce around a new leader. Outside the building, the city of Cleveland buzzed with renewed energy. Jersey sales surged to record highs. Local sports bars stayed packed, broadcasting endless debates about Sanders' future. Season ticket waiting lists filled up again. For a franchise long haunted by quarterback instability, Sanders wasn't just hope, he was proof that a new era had arrived. And the impact rippled beyond Cleveland. Across the NFL, analysts debated whether this was a one-off moment or the beginning of something bigger. Was this the dawn of a new age where young athletes no longer bowed to outdated hierarchies? Could Sanders' boldness inspire other players to seize control of their narratives? Some called it reckless, others called it revolutionary. But one fact was undeniable: Sanders had changed the Browns. He had forced an organization mired in dysfunction to evolve. He had transformed himself from a rookie to a franchise centerpiece. And he had done it not with tantrums or outbursts, but with a steady gaze into a television camera and 3 perfectly chosen sentences. This wasn't just about football anymore. It was about leadership, about authenticity, about the courage to confront dysfunction head-on even when the odds are stacked against you. For Cleveland, the message was clear. The past, defined by caution, politics, and safe answers, was gone. The future had arrived, and it wore number 2. Shedeur Sanders hadn't just played the game, he'd rewritten the rules.